I let myself in at 6 in the morning, quiet the way you do when you think you're a gift. I had a tray of takeout coffee balanced on one hand. 2 cups. I'd ordered hers without thinking, the way you order for someone you've shared a kitchen with for 3 years. Oat milk, 1 sugar, the lid she liked because it didn't dribble. My duffel was still salt-stiff on my shoulder. 7 months of North Sea will do that. The canvas had gone hard at the seams, like the air out there cures things. I was already grinning at the dark hallway, picturing her face. And then I heard sanding. Slow, even, coming from the spare room, the room I thought was empty. My name is Marsh, I'm 35. I weld and cut steel off rigs nobody wants anymore. I take old platforms apart in cold water so somebody else can pretend they were never there. Decommissioning, they call it. I'm good at leaving a place looking like I was never in it. So I knew the sound of someone working before sunrise. I just never expected to hear it on this side of the door. I set the coffee on the kitchen counter, both cups. And I went to look. The spare room was June's bench room, her refinishing setup, clamps and rags and the smell of primer that lived in the walls now. I knew that room with my eyes shut. I'd called her from oil rigs while she stripped varnish in it, both of us talking about nothing while she worked. But the door was usually open when she sanded, for the fumes. This time it was shut. I pushed it. She was standing over the bench with a sanding block in her hand, mid-stroke, and she froze the second the hinge gave. Didn't turn at first, just stopped, shoulders up around her ears. And on the bench, clamped and upright, almost done, was my father's hope chest. Cedar. The grain he'd picked himself. The dovetails he'd cut by hand before his hands quit on him. The lid was almost hung, one hinge in, the second sitting open like a question. The piece that had lived in storage for 4 years in a box I paid $40 a month to forget about was sitting in my apartment nearly finished. June turned around then, slow. She had primer dust on her forearms and a smudge across her jaw where she'd pushed her hair back. She looked at me like I was the one who'd broken in. "You weren't supposed to see this," she said. "Not yet." I didn't say anything. I couldn't, really. My mouth had a few words in it and none of them lined up. Let me back up. Because the chest matters and the why of it matters more. My dad started that thing the year before he got sick. He told me it was for whoever I ended up with someday. Said it like a joke, but he wasn't joking, and we both knew it. He sanded those cedar boards on weekends in a garage that smelled like sawdust and the coffee he wasn't supposed to drink. He never finished it. That part isn't the story. People die with projects open. Everybody does. The story is that I put it in storage and left it there, on purpose, for 4 years. Because finishing it would have meant I wanted the thing it was built to hold. A someday, a person, a future you keep instead of one you keep moving past. And I wasn't built for keeping. I'd worked that out about myself early. I was the guy who took the next contract, the colder water, the longer rotation, the job that put a continent between me and any room that started to feel like mine. When the North Sea offer came, I took it before I finished reading the email. 7 months. Furthest out they had. I told myself it was the money. It wasn't the money. It was that the apartment had started to feel like a place I'd miss. And missing a place is the first crack in a guy like me. So I left to keep the crack from spreading. I should tell you about June. We'd been roommates 3 years. Not a love story, a logistics one to start. I'd put out an ad. After a lease went bad on me, some landlord who decided the rent was a suggestion he could revise. June answered it. She'd just left a place where the guy upstairs played bass at 2 in the morning and the heat only worked when he wasn't home. We were both running from somewhere worse. That's most roommate stories. She was a furniture restorer. Still is. She takes other people's ruined chairs and dressers and brings them back, and people pay her for it, and she's better at it than she admits at parties. She ran her whole bench out of the second bedroom. The fumes were a negotiation. So was the thermostat. So was the good chair by the window, which was technically hers, but which I sat in anyway when she was out. We had a rule. We never said it out loud, which is how you know it was real. The rule was that we didn't. Whatever the thing is that roommates sometimes become, we weren't going to be it. It kept the apartment livable. It kept me from ruining the one place I liked by treating it like everywhere else I'd left. And it worked. For 3 years it worked. She'd sand at odd hours. I'd call from rigs at odd hours. The time zones never lining up and she'd pick up anyway, half asleep, and ask me how the cold was. She knew I called when I couldn't sleep. She never made it a thing. She just stayed on the line until the workboat horn meant I had to go. That was us. Primer and odd-hour phone calls. 2 people who'd each decided not to need anyone sharing a wall. So, you understand why I was standing in her doorway at 6 in the morning, unable to make a sound. She moved first. She picked a moving blanket off the floor, one of those gray quilted ones, and she draped it over the chest, quick, like covering something you didn't want a guest to see. The cedar disappeared under it and the room got smaller. "You're early," she said. "7 weeks," I said. My voice came out rough, contract wrapped. "Weather window closed, they sent us in." 7 weeks. She nodded like it was a number she had to do something about. "I didn't budget for you to be home." "I wanted to surprise you. I brought coffee." "You brought coffee," she repeated. "It's on the counter. Yours is the one that doesn't dribble." She looked at me for a second too long. Then she looked at the blanket and at the bench, and she started talking faster, like if she kept moving the words I wouldn't catch up. "Okay, so, the thing is the bench grew. I took on more pieces this year, 2 estate jobs. The storage situation got complicated, and you're half of the closet. I needed it for the cedar stock and the finishes, so I sort of moved into it, and I was going to put it all back before you got home, which was supposed to be 7 weeks from now, so. June. So it's a mess in here, that's all. It's a storage mess. I'll clear your half by the weekend." She was making it logistics. I'd watched her do this to clients, turn a feeling into a delivery date. It's a thing she does when something's too big to hold. She breaks it into tasks so her hands have somewhere to go. I wasn't really listening to the words. I was looking at the shape under the blanket. "That's my dad's chest," I said. She stopped. "Yeah," she said. "It's supposed to be in storage, in a box across town." "I know where it's supposed to be. It's almost finished." She didn't answer that one. She set the sanding block down on the bench, lined it up square to the edge the way she did when she didn't know what to do with her hands. I should have asked the obvious questions, how she'd gotten it out, and when and why, any of them. Instead, I just stood there, jet-lagged and salt-stiff, with 7 months of cold still in my joints, looking at a thing I'd spent 4 years and $40 a month making sure I'd never have to look at. The unit was across town under my name, with a code only I knew. So at some point I'd handed it over, and somehow I'd let myself forget I had. That was the part that didn't sit right. I forget things on purpose. I'm careful about it. And this one had walked right past the careful part of me without leaving a scratch. That's when I saw the cards. There was an open toolbox at the end of the bench, her chisels, a roll of sandpaper grades, and tucked along the side, a stack of index cards. White, gone a little soft at the corners. The top one had handwriting I'd know anywhere. My father. He kept build logs his whole life, an index card for every project, and seeing his hand again undid something in my chest before I'd read a word. Every card was the same shape of note, what he did that day, what he learned, what he'd do different next time. I hadn't seen those crowded little letters in 4 years. It went through me the way cold water finds a gap in a wetsuit. Right to the spine, no warning. I picked the stack up before I thought about it. His card was on top. The ink was faded, the loops of his letters exactly the way I remembered. A little crowded, a man writing fast before he forgot. But under his, the handwriting changed. Hers. Card after card in June's tight even hand, and in the corner of each one a date. I didn't read them. I want to be clear about that. I didn't read a single word past the dates. I just fanned the corners with my thumb, the way you check a deck, and I saw the dates run. Month of them. The most recent one was 3 weeks ago. The oldest one was near the bottom, and I caught the month on it, and the month was the month I left. I put the cards down. I put them down too fast. The way you set down a pan you forgot was hot. They slid and one fell on the bench, and I didn't pick it up. Because the whole thing had just turned over in my chest. I'd come home to give her a surprise. I'd flown across an ocean grinning about a tray of coffee and the look on her face. That was supposed to be mine. The surprise was supposed to be a thing I did to her. And instead I was standing in her bench room, finding out she'd been doing something the whole time I was gone. Something with my father's handwriting in it, and her own underneath. Something she'd covered with a blanket the second she heard the door. The surprise was supposed to be mine. The secret was hers. And whatever this apartment had been for 3 years, 2 people sharing a wall and a thermostat and a rule they never said out loud, it wasn't going to get to be just that anymore. I could feel it. The room had changed temperature. June saw my face do something. I don't know what it did. I wasn't in charge of it. "Cole," she said, quieter now, the fast logistics voice gone. "You've been awake for what, a day and a half?" "About that." "You flew all night." "Yeah." "Then go sleep." She wiped her hands on the rag, slow, not looking at me. "Sleep off the flight. I'll explain the whole thing, the chest, the cards. All of it, just not at 6 in the morning when you smell like a cargo hold and I haven't had coffee." "I brought you coffee." The corner of her mouth moved, not a smile. The ghost of where one usually went. "I know you did," she said. "Go to bed, Cole, it'll keep. It's kept this long." That last part landed somewhere I couldn't reach. So I went. Because I didn't have a better idea, and because 3 years of the rule had trained me to do what kept the apartment livable. I left her in the bench room with the blanket over the chest and the cards on the table, and the one that fell still lying where it fell. I lay down in my own bed in my own room that suddenly didn't feel like either, still in my clothes, the salt of 7 months in the fabric. And I did the thing she told me not to do. I did the math. The oldest card. The date near the bottom of the stack. I lined it up against the day I left, the day I read that email and signed 7 months away to keep from missing a place. She'd started the chest the week I left. Not after. Not when she got bored, not for an estate client, not because the cedar was taking up space. The week I walked out the door and got on a plane to put a continent between me and this apartment, June had pulled my dead father's unfinished chest out of a storage unit across town, carried it up to her bench, and begun to finish the thing I'd spent 4 years making sure stayed unfinished. While I was leaving to forget the place, she'd been here, sanding it into something. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the building wake up around me. Pipes. A neighbor's alarm. The ordinary sounds of a home that had apparently been keeping a secret for 7 months in the next room over. I didn't sleep. I lay there doing the math again, in case I'd done it wrong. Counting backward from the date in the corner, week by week, all the way to the morning I left. I hadn't done it wrong. She'd started it the week I left, and I had absolutely no idea what that meant. But I knew, lying there with the cold still in my joints and the smell of her primer in the walls, that I wasn't going to be able to sleep until I found out. I slept 4 hours and woke up to the wrong kitchen. Not wrong like ruined. Wrong like somebody else had been living their whole life in it without asking me. The mugs were gone from the hook by the window. I stood there in my socks at 10 in the morning, hand out for a mug that wasn't there, and I felt like a guest in a place I paid half the rent on. June walked past me to the cabinet over the stove. She opened it. There they were, all 6 mugs lined up like they'd always lived there. "You moved the mugs," I said. "I moved them to where mugs go. They were where I left them." "Yes," she said, "wrong." She handed me one. The blue one with the chip I'd been meaning to throw out for 2 years. She knew it was my mug. She'd kept it on her side of the cabinet the whole time, and now she was handing it back like nothing. That was the morning, basically. That was the whole first week. You learn to share a space with somebody by sanding off the parts of yourself that catch. You do it slow, without noticing. And then one of you leaves for 7 months, and the other one keeps sanding, and when you come back the shape of the place has changed, and you've got no say in it. The thermostat lived at 66 now. I like it warm. I'd spent 7 months sleeping in a steel box over freezing water, and I wanted my own walls to feel like the inside of something. June liked it cool because the cold kept the wood from moving while she worked. I bumped it up to 70. By noon it was back at 66. Neither of us said a word about it. We just had this slow war over a little plastic box on the wall, both of us pretending we didn't know the other one was fighting it. The good chair was the real battle. There's one good chair in the living room. Leather, sunken just right by the lamp. For 3 years it was understood to be mine. I came home and it had a folding side table next to it, stacked with sandpaper grades and a little dish of screws, and a reading light clamped to the arm. She'd moved into it. Not on purpose, the way water moves into a low spot. I sat in it the first night and she came in and stopped in the doorway and looked at me sitting there. And I looked at her, and we both understood that the rule about the chair had quietly expired while I was at sea, and now we were going to have to make a new one. "You can have it back," she said. "It's your chair now." "It's your chair. I just borrowed it. For 7 months. It missed you," she said, and went to the couch, and that was that. I got the chair. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like she'd handed me back something she'd kept warm. So we lived around each other again. We learned the new edges, and the whole time there was a door we weren't opening. The spare room, her bench, the chest under the moving blanket. We both knew it was in there. We both walked past it 40 times a day, and we'd built this whole arrangement where the chest was a chore, a thing taking up space, a logistics problem we'd get to. She'd say,
"I need to clear the bench out. I know I'll find a spot for it." And I'd say, "No rush." And we'd both nod like two people agreeing the weather was fine. Like it was furniture.
Like it wasn't my dead father's handwriting on a stack of index cards in her toolbox, with her handwriting underneath it, in dates that ran the whole length of the time I was gone. I almost asked about the cards twice a day. I'd get the first word loaded. "Hey, those cards in the..." and she'd find something to do with her hands. She'd almost let me too. I could see it. She'd get this look like as she'd decide it, her mouth would open and then she'd close it and ask if I wanted coffee. We were two people standing at the edge of a thing, both leaning, neither falling. For a week, we leaned. Then there were the pancakes. Sunday morning, I'm up at 6 out of habit, the rig still in my body. She's making pancakes. And these are bad pancakes, I want to be clear about that. June makes terrible pancakes, always has. Too thick in the middle, the edges gone lacy and dark because she runs the pan too hot, and she will not be told. For 3 years I complained about these pancakes. It was a bit we had. I'd eat every one and complain the whole time, and she'd tell me to cook my own, and I never did, because complaining about her pancakes on a Sunday was one of the best parts of my week, and I didn't know it. I stood in the kitchen doorway and watched her flip one, burn one edge, frown at it the way she always did, and it hit me sideways. She'd been making these. The whole time. Sunday mornings for 7 months, with me 1,000 miles out on the water, making bad pancakes for nobody, burning the edges with no one there to complain about it. How long, I said, have you been making Sunday pancakes? She didn't turn around. I don't know what you mean. You made these while I was gone. A pause, the spatula went still. I like pancakes, she said. You don't though. You don't even eat them. You make them and you eat 2 bites and you give me the rest. She turned around then. She had flour on her wrist and that look she got when I'd seen too much. It was Sunday, she said, like that, and explained. Maybe it did. Maybe the whole thing was that simple and that big. It was Sunday, so she made the pancakes because making them was a way of keeping the shape of a morning that had somebody in it. She kept the chair warm. She kept the mugs. She kept making the bad pancakes on the day we always had them. She'd built a whole little Sunday around a person who wasn't there, and she'd done it without telling herself that's what she was doing. I ate everyone. I complained about all of them. She told me to cook my own, and for about 20 minutes the apartment felt exactly like it used to, before the chest, before the cards, before I knew what I was looking at. Tank called me that afternoon. Tank Iglesias. We worked the same rig for the back half of my contract, cutting up a dead platform 30 meters over the North Sea, him on the torch when I was on the rigging and the other way around. Big guy. Laughs at everything, including stuff that isn't funny, especially stuff that isn't funny. He'd flown home a week before me, back to a house in Texas, and a wife he talked about constantly, out on the water. I picked up and he was half in the bag already, 3 in the afternoon, voice all loose and warm. Marsh, he says. Marsh, you back? You home? I'm home, man. How's it feel? Tell me it feels good. It's strange, I said. Good strange. He laughed. Yeah, strange. And then he kept talking easy, like he was telling me about a fishing trip. He said his wife had redone the whole house while he was gone. New paint, new floors in the front room, knocked out the wall between the kitchen and the dining room she'd always hated. Place looks incredible, he said. I walk in, I don't even recognize it. It's beautiful, man. That's great, I said. Yeah, a beat. Only thing is, another beat and his voice didn't change. It stayed cheerful the whole way down. She set up the second bedroom as an office, her office, and I'm standing in there going, hey, where's my stuff? And she goes, oh, I moved your stuff to the garage. I didn't know when you'd be back. And the garage is, you know, the garage. Tank. It's fine, he said, laughing. It's good. She did a real nice job. He stopped. She built the house for the way her life works now. Without me in it, that's all. It's just a house for one that's got room for a guest. And he laughed again, harder, like the laugh could carry it off, and I sat there in my good chair and I did not laugh with him, because I knew what he was describing. It was the exact opposite of what was happening in my apartment, and I hadn't fully understood that until I heard the version where somebody got forgotten in the present tense. I got off the phone and I went and stood outside the spare room. I didn't go in, I just stood there. And then June came down the hall and found me standing at a closed door like a man who'd lost his keys, and instead of asking what I was doing, she opened it and said, if you're going to lurk, you can hold a clamp. So I held a clamp. That's how it started. Just steadying the clamp. I told myself that's all it was. The lid needed to seat while the glue set on the last hinge mortise, and a chest that size, you want a second pair of hands on the clamp so it doesn't walk while you tighten. I'm a welder. I know how to hold a thing still while somebody else does the work that matters. So I held it still. And she worked, and it was the easiest I'd felt since I walked in the door. We were good at this part. We'd always been good at being in a room together, not talking. She'd hand me a thing without saying, take this, and I'd take it. I'd see the cord about to snag and move it before she tripped. The radio was on low. Cedar smell everywhere, that sweet, sharp cedar smell, the kind that gets in your clothes. My dad used to smell like that for weeks at a time back when he was building. I didn't say that. I just breathed it in and held the clamp. After a while, she handed me a sanding block. Here, the front panel. Go with the grain, not across it, and don't lean on it. I went with the grain. I did not lean on it. I sanded one cedar panel smooth, this big clean panel that would face out into whatever room this chest ended up in someday, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, which was that I was making a thing instead of taking a thing apart. My whole job is taking things apart, cutting dead steel into pieces small enough to lift away. I'd forgotten what the other direction felt like. Then she reached over and took the block back. Not rough. I've got this part, she said, and turned the panel away from me. Just slightly, just enough. There was a section near the bottom edge, a place where the old wood my dad had started met the new wood she'd added, and she ran the block over that seam herself, slow, careful, with her body angled so I couldn't quite see her hands. She was guarding it. Whatever's that seam was, stopped and hers began. That part was hers, and she wasn't ready to let me near it. I let her have it. You learn that, living with somebody. You learn which things to reach for and which to let stay covered. We worked till dark. We didn't talk about the cards. She made tea wrong, the way she does, too strong, and I drank it. I want to tell you that night was the night something happened. It wasn't. It was just a good night in a small room with a person I'd missed more than I'd let myself know, and that was enough. And I went to bed thinking the leaning could go on like that forever and I'd be fine. It couldn't though, and she ended it on purpose. I know it was on purpose because the spare room locked. There's a little hook latch on the inside, and every night she said it, I'd heard the click through the wall for a week. The chest was hers until she said otherwise, and the lock was how she said it. But the next morning she went out for primer and stain, took her keys, took her jacket, and on her way past me at the chair she said, "Real light, real careful. I left the bench out. If you want to keep sanding. The front panel could take another pass." And she left. And I heard the door, and the spare room was unlocked. She'd unlocked it for me. She'd left the door open and walked away so she wouldn't have to be in the room when I did the thing she was finally letting me do. I didn't sand the panel. I went to the toolbox. The cards were where they'd been the whole time, his handwriting on top, hers underneath. I slid out the first one of hers. The bottom card, the oldest one. The dates ran newest to oldest from the top down, so the bottom was the start, and the start was a date I recognized because it was the night I left, the night my flight went out. She'd written this the same day I got on the plane. I expected a build log, lumber dimensions, a cut list, the kind of thing you write so you remember where you were when you pick the work back up. That's how it started. The first line was exactly what I expected, cedar quarter sawn, the boards from his garage still good. A list, like I said. Then the next line went somewhere it had no business going. Coal left at 4. Airport was empty. He hates being seen off, so I didn't offer. And then the line under that, and the one under that. And it stopped being a list and it never once admitted it. It kept the short lines. It kept the practical voice. But it was a letter. It was a letter that decided halfway through the first sentence that it would be safer as a list, and stayed one the whole way down. Started his dad's chest tonight. Don't know why. The apartment is too quiet to sit in. Figured I'd finish one thing he couldn't. I read it twice. The radio wasn't on. The cedar smell sat in the room. I set the card down on the bench, flat, careful, the way you set down something you don't have a place for yet. And I looked at the door of her room down the hall. For 3 years there'd been a rule about that door, an easy rule, a clean line, the kind of line that made living together possible. I knew exactly where it was. I'd never once been confused about it. I stood there with her handwriting still in my eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, I did not know what the rule was anymore. So I stood there a while longer, not knowing the rule, and then I did the thing you do when you can't find the rule. I went looking for the man who'd known it last. My father. He'd started that chest the winter before he died. Cedar, quarter sawn, the good stuff from the back of his garage that he'd been saving for something he wouldn't name. He told me it was for whoever I ended up with someday. He said it like a joke and meant it like a will, and I let it sit. He got sick, and then he was gone, and the chest went into a storage unit with 3 sides and a lid and no future, and I paid $40 a month to keep it in the dark for 6 years because I could not finish it and I could not throw it out. I never told anybody why. I told June that night, though. We were back in the spare room, both of us pretending to work, the chest open on the bench with its lid finally hung true. I had a rag and a can of paste wax I wasn't using. She had the sanding block she wasn't sanding with. And it came out of me sideways, the way the real things do. I couldn't finish it because finishing it meant I wanted it, I said. She didn't look up. She knew not to. My whole life is leaving things better gone, I said. I cut up dead rigs, I take the platform apart so the water looks empty again. I'm good at it. I'm good at making it so nobody can tell I was there, and my dad builds this thing that's supposed to last, this box you put a life in, and he hands it to me and I stopped. Wanting to keep it felt like getting caught, like somebody'd see I wasn't built the way I tell people I'm built. That was the shape of it. The shame wasn't the leaving. The shame was the wanting to stay, and the chest was proof I had it in me, so I locked the proof in a unit across town and went to sea. June set the block down, quiet. I knew that, she said. Sort of. I didn't have the words you just used. But I knew. How? Because I did the same thing with it. She ran her thumb along the cedar rim, that seam where his work met hers. When you left, the apartment got loud the way an empty place gets loud. And I had your dad's chest in storage paperwork, because you'd put me on the unit so somebody local could deal with it if. She didn't finish that one either. So I went and got it, and I told myself I was clearing the unit, saving you $40 a month, doing you a favor. You weren't. No, she almost smiled. I wanted a piece of you in the apartment that I could point at and call woodwork. If I just missed you, that's a thing I have to feel. But if I'm restoring a chest, that's a project. I could call it work. I could do it at 2 in the morning and tell myself it was the deadline and not the quiet. That landed in me like a tool dropped from a height. She'd done exactly what I'd done. Taken the wanting and dressed it up as a job, because a job you're allowed to have and a want you have to earn. We sat with that. The cedar smell did most of the talking. And then the rest of the world came in the door, because it always does. It came in as a phone call. The contractor, Devlin, the guy who books my rotations, and I knew before I answered that a call from Devlin on a Tuesday meant work, because Devlin doesn't call to see how you're doing. Called to offer me a back-to-back. The Gulf this time, a decommissioning job, 2 rotations stacked end to end, leaving in 3 weeks. More money than I'd ever cleared on a single contract. Half year on the water, and I'd come home with a number that changes things. I'll think about it, I told him. I never said that to Devlin. I always said yes. Saying yes was the whole arrangement of my life. He went quiet for a second like he'd misdialed, and then he said, "Take the week," and hung up. I put the phone face down on the bench. June was watching me. She'd heard enough of it through the speaker. "Gulf?" she said. 3 weeks out, back to back. She nodded slow. And then she did a thing I didn't expect, which was she told me her version of the same trap, like she'd been waiting for a reason. "I got offered a lease," she said. "A real shop. Across town off Del 900, that strip with the old auto bays. One of them came open, concrete floors, a bay door, 3-phase power, for the big equipment. My bench has outgrown this room and you know it. I've got chairs stacked in the hall. I turn away work because I can't fit it." "That's good," I said, and I meant it, and it came out hollow. "It's good," she agreed, and hers came out the same way. So there we were. Both of us with a door out, opened at the exact same hour, 3 weeks of more leaving for me, a lease across town for her. The question we'd been leaning at for a week stopped being whether 2 people might fall toward each other. It turned into something harder. Whether 2 people who were both already halfway out the door could possibly walk back in. It stopped being will they, it became can they, and can they is the question with teeth. That should have been the night something broke open. It wasn't. She got quiet and careful, and so did I, and we put the lid down on the chest and went to our separate rooms, and I lay there, doing the math on 3 weeks the way I'd done the math on the dates. If we live around each other, the people next to us go invisible. That's just the way the eye works. You stop seeing the chair you sit in every day. You stop seeing the person who keeps the chair warm. I'd lived 3 years next to June and called it roommates, because that was the word that let me leave. If anything in here is landing for you, that's the whole reason I'm telling it, so stay with me because it gets to the part that cost me something. The thing that cost me came 2 days later, and it came out of June without me asking. We were finishing the inside. She was lining the bottom with thin cedar, the aromatic kind, the part that does the actual work of a hope chest, keeping the moths off whatever future you fold into it. And she stopped, mid-board, and she said it to the inside of the chest, not to me. I almost threw it out twice. I didn't move. Once in March, once in June, the month, not me. A small dry breath that wasn't a laugh. I had it on the dolly, I had it by the door. The second time I had it in the elevator, and I rode down to the lobby with it, and stood by the dumpster in the alley for 20 minutes. Why? Because of what it is. She finally looked at me. "It's a hope chest, Cole. It's a box you build to hold a future in, and I'm sitting here every night, building a future box for a man whose whole life is being somewhere else. I'm sanding a home for somebody who'd rather be at sea." Her jaw worked. And the worst part wasn't even that. The worst part was thinking, if he comes back and sees this finished, he's going to feel kept. He's going to walk in and feel a door close behind him. And I would rather have thrown the whole thing in a dumpster than be the door that closes behind you. That is the most honest thing anybody has ever said to me, and she said it to a box. She didn't want to be the thing that made me feel kept. She'd carried the proof of how much she wanted me down to an alley, twice, and almost let the garbage take it, because the only thing she was more afraid of than wanting me was being the cage I came home to. I didn't have anything to say to that. There isn't a clamp you hold to make that sit still, so I just came around the bench and stood next to her, close, our shoulders almost touching, both of us looking down into the empty inside of a chest that smelled like my father, and we let it be true for a while without trying to fix it. Then Tank called. I almost didn't pick up. But Tank's the kind of friend you pick up for, even when you've got your own thing burning, so I stepped into the hall and answered, and the first thing was the laugh. Same laugh, but thinner. Stretched over something the way a tarp gets stretched over a load that's bigger than the tarp. Marsh, she's gone, man. Laura's gone. Filed Monday. Tank. It's fine. It's fine. It's the right thing. We both knew. The laugh again, doing its job, carrying the weight it couldn't carry. It's good, honestly. I leaned against the wall in my hallway, June's primer in the walls, and I let him talk it down to the truth, because that's what you do. You stay on the line until the laugh runs out of cover. You want to know the worst part? He said finally, and the laugh was gone now, all the way gone. It wasn't the redone house, it wasn't the office or my stuff in the garage. I told myself that was the bad part, because that part's easy to be mad at. The worst part is, I walked in after 7 months and I stood in my own kitchen and I realized she hadn't thought about me, not once, not in a way that was happening now. She thought about me as a thing that used to be there and a thing that'd come back and need feeding. Past and future. Never. He stopped. Never in the present tense, man. Whole time I was gone, nobody back here had me in their head as a guy who was alive right now, today, having a Tuesday. You go away and you find out if anybody's holding you in the present tense. And nobody was holding me. I stood in that hallway and I did not say anything for a long time, and Tank let me, because Tank's a good one even drunk and gutted. Because 3 feet from me on a workbench was a stack of index cards, 7 months of them, every one of them dated. Every one of them written in the present tense. Cole left at 4. The apartment is too quiet to sit in. Started his dad's chest tonight. June had done the precise opposite of what got done to Tank. While I was 1,000 miles out on the cold water making myself easy to forget, she had sat in our apartment and held me in her head as a man who was alive right now, today, every single day, and she'd written the proof down and dated it, so even she couldn't pretend it was something else. I got off the phone. I went back in the spare room. June saw my face and didn't ask. And the whole thing turned over inside me, quiet like a heavy thing rolling onto its other side. It had been about wanting her. That part was easy almost. Wanting is the cheap part. What I was looking at now was the expensive part. The part with teeth, which was whether I could stand to be a man who got held in someone's mind. Whether I could let her keep me there. Because being held means being seen, and being seen means she gets to know exactly how forgettable I'd spent my whole life trying to be, and trust her not to put me down. And on her side, the same coin flipped. Whether she could let me catch her wanting it. She'd hidden the want under sandpaper and primer for 7 months, because a woman who wants out loud can be left, and June had built a whole life around not letting herself get left. So it stopped being 2 people circling a chest. It became 2 people deciding whether to trust each other with the one thing each of us had spent years making sure nobody could see. That night we worked late, past midnight. The chest was nearly done, just the wax and the buffing left, and we both knew it, and neither of us said it, because the chest being done meant a decision being due. The radio was off, just the soft sound of 2 rags on cedar, hers and mine, going with the grain. Our hands ended up on the rim at the same time. Both of us reaching to steady the lid as it settled, her right hand and my left, close enough on that cedar edge that I could feel the warmth coming off her knuckles. We both went still. Neither of us moved the hand. I could have said it then. The whole thing was right there in my chest, loaded, the first word ready the way it had been ready for a week. I think she could see it loaded. I think that's why she moved. She pulled her hand back first. Slow, not a flinch, but sure. The same sure she'd used when she took the sanding block back. The move of a person guarding the part that's still theirs. The lease, she said to the cedar, not to me. I have to give them an answer Friday. They've got somebody else for the bay if I pass. And that was all. She left the question hanging there in the cedar smell 3 days wide, and she said goodnight and went to her room, and I heard the little hook latch on the inside of her door go click for the first time in a week. She'd unlocked it once to let me in. Now she'd locked it again. And I understood the lock. Now, it wasn't keeping me out of a room. It was keeping her from saying a thing she wasn't ready to say in a hallway at 1 a.m. I should have gone to bed. I didn't. I stood in the spare room with the almost finished chest and the stack of cards, and I did the thing I'd been not letting myself do, which was read all the way to the top of the stack. Newest to oldest, the dates ran down. So I went the other way, up, toward now, toward the last thing she'd written, watching the months of her holding me in the present, Kent's cord the day I walked in the door. The top card stopped me cold. Because the top card had no date. Every other card, 7 months of them, dated in her small hard print in the corner. This one, the last one, the one on top, the most recent thing in the stack, had the corner left blank, and the card itself was unfinished. 3 lines. The pen had started a 4th line, 1 stroke, a single mark, and stopped like she'd been called away, or like she'd put the pen down on purpose. The card she'd never written out, the only one. And I stood there in the cedar smell at 1:30 in the morning, and I understood what I was looking at. She hadn't forgotten to date it. She hadn't run out of things to say. She'd left the last card blank, because the last card wasn't hers to finish alone. 7 months she'd dated the proof and stacked it and never sent a single one, and she'd held the last line open, undated, unfinished, because she was waiting to write the ending in person, with me in the room. If I ever came home and stayed. I called the contractor on a Tuesday from the stairwell, so June wouldn't hear me lose my nerve. He had the back-to-back rotation ready. 3 weeks out, double the leaving, the kind of money that lets a man tell himself the leaving is responsible. I'd taken every offer like it for 9 years, and my thumb already knew the shape of saying yes. I said no. I said it before I went upstairs. That part mattered to me more than it should have. I needed the no to be mine, made in a cold stairwell with nobody watching. Before I ever stood in front of her, I knew how it would look if I waited, like she'd reached out and closed a door on me, like she'd kept me. And the whole point, the thing those cards had been teaching me for 7 months, was that she'd never once tried to keep me. She'd just refused to forget me while I kept leaving. So the no had to come first, clean with no witness. The contractor asked if I was sure. I told him I'd never been sure of anything in my life, and I was done waiting to be. Then I hung up and climbed the stairs and let myself in. She was at the bench the way she always was, primer dust hanging in the light. The chest sat finished now. Lid hung true, cedar gone honey gold under the wax she'd rubbed in by hand. My father started that thing for whoever I ended up with someday, then he died with it half a joint short, and I put it in storage so I'd never have to admit it was waiting on me. June heard the door and didn't turn around. "You're home early again," she said. "I'm sensing a pattern." I crossed the room and put my hand flat on the cedar lid, where his hands had been, and then hers. I'd rehearsed nothing. Everything I'd planned to say went out the window of that stairwell with the word no. "It's not his anymore," I said. She went still over the sandpaper. "My dad started this chest and you finished it, but it isn't his project I'm standing in front of." I made myself look at her. "It isn't the thing I abandoned in storage either. It's ours, if you'll have it be that." She set the block down very slowly. "I turned down the rotation," I said. "Already, 20 minutes ago in the stairwell before I came up. So you'd know I didn't stay because you trapped me. You never trapped me. You just kept a light on in a room I told myself I didn't want." Her jaw did the thing it does when she's deciding whether to be brave. "Cole. I've spent my whole adult life living in the future tense," I said. "The next contract, the next port. The next thing that wasn't here. I left because standing still felt like losing, and you stood still for 3 years and built something the whole time you stood." My voice went somewhere I didn't recognize. "I want to be in the present tense for once, just once. With you, in this room that smells like primer and cedar and your terrible coffee. My coffee is fine. Your coffee is a war crime, and I want to drink it every morning anyway." She laughed, and it came out wet. I'd carried the cards up in my jacket, the whole stack of them. 7 months of dates in her square little hand, the build log she wrote to me and never sent, my father's writing on the bottom card and all the rest in hers. And the last one, the one with no date, the one she'd left undated and unfinished because she was waiting to write the ending in person. I took that one out. "You left this blank," I said. "I figured out why." She didn't move. I read it to her out loud, her own words, the ones she'd half written and stopped. About how a chest built to hold a future feels like a cruel thing to build for a man who'd rather be at sea. About how she almost hauled it to the curb twice. About how she kept sanding instead, because sanding was a thing she could call woodwork instead of waiting. About how she didn't want to be the thing that made me feel kept. And then it stopped, mid-sentence, because she didn't know how it ended yet. I lowered the card. Here's the part I was ashamed to want, I said. My whole life I thought being thought about was a debt. Somebody keeps you in mind, and now you owe them. So I made sure nobody had to think about me. I left first every time. Can't be a burden to a person who's already watching you walk down the dock. I had to stop and start again. I didn't want to be waited for. I thought wanting that made me weak. Made me a weight somebody had to carry. Coal. I want it now, I said. I want to be waited for, without it being a debt. I want to let one person keep a piece of me on purpose. You did it for 7 months while I pretended I didn't notice. I noticed. I read every card the week you left the door unlocked, and I've been a coward about it ever since. I set the undated card on top of the chest. I came home 7 weeks early because some part of me already knew. I just had to quit a job in a stairwell to admit it. She crossed the room then. She put her hand over mine on the cedar. The first time in 3 years either of us broke the rule, and the rule didn't survive it, and neither of us mourned the rule. I signed the lease, she said. For a second, the floor dropped out of me. The workshop across town, the real bench, the one the apartment had outgrown. I'd half braced for it to be the thing that took her out the door I'd just walked back into. Friday, she said. The deadline was Friday. I signed it this morning. Good, I said, and meant it, and was a little surprised I meant it. You don't get to do the thing you do, she said. Where one person disappears into the other and calls it love. You're not going to quit your rigs and stand in my shop holding a clamp for the rest of your life. And I'm not going to fold my bench into a corner of your idea of a home. She tightened her hand on mine. I took the workshop because it's mine and I'm good at it and I want it. And the chest stays here at the apartment because that's ours. And ours doesn't live in my shop, it lives where we do. She looked at me, steady. There's room in the lease for you to come work the wood when you're home. I made sure of that before I signed. Room for you, not a place you have to fill, so I won't leave. I understood her then the way I'd understood the cards. She wasn't sacrificing the thing she'd built to make space for me. She was building the space wide enough that I fit without anybody shrinking. I'd seen the other version up close. I'd seen women in port towns fold themselves around a man's schedule until there was nothing left of them but the schedule. And I'd watched men do it back, and I never once envied a single one of those couples. June wasn't offering me that. She was offering me the thing that's harder to give. 2 whole lives standing close enough to touch, and not one of them dimmed to do it. You kept your shop, I said. I kept my shop. Turns out, a person can do both. I don't remember which of us pulled the other in. I remember cedar against my hip and primer dust in her hair, and the specific weight of holding something that had been holding me back for 7 months, without me knowing. We didn't finish it that night. That part I want to be honest about, because the version where it all closes in one perfect evening is a lie, and she taught me to hate the lie. So I'll tell you the true version. We talked half the night with the chest open between us and neither of us reaching to close it, because closing it felt like a thing you only got to do once, and we wanted to do it right. She told me which cards she nearly burned. I told her which ports I'd stood on thinking about her bad pancakes and refusing to call it what it was. We fell asleep on the floor of the spare room like 2 teenagers. And the cedar smell got into both our jackets. And I woke up before her with my arm dead under her shoulder and didn't move it, because moving felt like leaving, and I was done with leaving. We finished it at dawn. She woke me at 5-something, the sky going gray at the window, the apartment, that exact temperature of cold I'd walked into months before, with a salt-stiff duffel and a takeout coffee, and no idea what was waiting in the spare room. It was the same hour I'd come home early and found her frozen mid-stroke, with my father's chest clamped to the bench. The light came in low and gray the way it had that first morning. And for once I wasn't carrying anything but the cards. She handed me the whole stack of them. All of them. The ones I'd read by stealth and the ones I never had. She'd been letting me see them in pieces for months, guarding the part that was hers. Now she just put the whole 7 months in my hands. Read them in order someday, she said. When you're ready, there's no rush anymore. Then she lifted the cedar lid. We'd talked about the first thing to go inside it. People put quilts in these, photos, letters, the linen for a life that hasn't happened yet. My father built it empty and died with it empty, and I'd kept it empty in storage like a thing too sacred to use. The first thing we put in it was the cards. She laid the stack flat against the cedar. 7 months of dates, the first one written the night I left, the one I'd done the math on while I lay awake jet-lagged and realized she'd started the chest the same week I started running. All of them in order, his handwriting on the bottom, and hers above it, like a conversation across the thing he never finished. And the undated one on top. That one's yours to finish, she said. She gave me the pen. My hands aren't built for this. They're built for a welding torch and a cutting arc and steel nobody wants anymore. They shook over that little index card like it weighed more than a rig. I dated it in my own writing, ugly next to her square, neat hand. The day's date, the real one, the present tense I'd been afraid of my whole life. And under the date, where her sentence had stopped mid-thought because she didn't know the ending yet, I wrote the ending. I'm not going to tell you what it said. Some things you keep in cedar. I laid the card on top of the stack. She watched me do it the way she'd watched everything, steady, hiding the wanting under a face that gave nothing away, except this time she let it give a little. Then I closed the lid. Cedar makes a sound when it shuts right, a soft, full, fitted sound. Joints that a dead man started and a living woman finished, meeting clean. My father would have liked that sound. He spent his life chasing joints that met clean. By the following spring, the spare room wasn't a spare room anymore. She moved the big work to the shop across town like she said she would, and she's good there. Better than the apartment ever let her be. But the second bedroom became a real bench for the small work, the close work, the wood she does at home with the window open. My welding gear lives in the closet between contracts, because I still take them, the shorter ones now, the ones with an end date I can hold in my head. I left for 6 weeks in February and I came back. I'll keep coming back. That's the whole trick of it I missed for 9 years. Leaving's only loss if there's nothing keeping a place for you. The chest sits at the foot of our life instead of the back of a storage unit. It holds the things a future holds. Linen we haven't used. A drawing she did of the apartment. The cards, all of them, the first thing in and still the heart of it. And the mornings. The bad coffee, the moved mugs, the thermostat we still fight over, the pancakes she used to make for no one on Sundays and now makes for someone. We faked our way through a domestic rhythm for 3 years and called it roommates. Turns out we were rehearsing. I keep coming back to one morning in particular. The morning this all started, I opened a door I wasn't supposed to open, on a surprise that was supposed to be mine, and found a secret that was hers. I came home early to catch her off guard. Now I come home and she's not off guard. She's expecting me. The door I open is a door I'm expected at. Same 6 a.m. light, same salt-stiff duffel some weeks, same low-gray window. Everything about the picture matches that first morning except for the part that mattered, which is that someone is on the other side of the door, keeping the place warm on purpose. I spent a long time thinking being held in someone's mind was debt, a thing you'd have to pay back with your freedom, with your whole self, with standing in a shop holding a clamp until you disappeared. I had it backwards the entire time. Being held in someone's mind isn't a debt you owe them, it's the proof you were never as forgettable as leaving made you feel. Tank texts me sometimes. He's doing better. He says the worst part of his marriage ending wasn't the leaving. It was coming home to realize nobody had thought about him in the present tense the whole time he was gone. I think about that more than he knows, because I had the exact opposite waiting for me and I almost ran past it. Almost took a back-to-back rotation and called it responsible. A woman sanded cedar for 7 months and dated index cards to a man who kept leaving, and she did it without ever once asking him to stay. And that is the bravest thing I have ever stood next to. So I'll ask you what I asked myself, lying awake that first jet-lag night doing math on a stack of dates. What would you have done if you came home early and found the thing somebody had quietly been keeping for you the whole time you were gone? Would you have read the cards? Would you have closed the door and pretended you never saw? Or would you have finally stayed long enough to find out what you'd been running from? Have you ever experienced something like this, on either side of it, the one who kept the light on or the one who almost didn't come home to see it? Tell me your story down in the comments. I read them. And if you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.